Well, I'll begin by saying it's an honor to be invited to moderate this panel, even though I do versions of this for a living still. I'm honored to be invited by Kulluna Irada to moderate a timely discussion titled Hezbollah Disarmament, Local Pathways, and International Dynamics with two esteemed guests and friends, Michael Young, a senior editor at Carnegie's Middle East Center, and of course the editor of Diwan. For anyone that still has an appreciation for long form analysis, check out Diwan. And of course, a regular contributor to The National. And I'll highlight also an author of The Ghosts of Martyrs Square, published some 15 years ago. But still, it opens a window into the post Syrian occupation years and really what Hezbollah inherited from Syrian occupation in terms of security and foreign policy. So we'll get into that today. And of course, Albert Kostanian, who's a former chairman and current board member of Kulluna Irada, managing partner at Levant Consult, and also, of course, the host of LBC's Vision 2030. If you want long form discussion with measured, tempered, nuanced voices talking about politics and economics, it's the go to destination. So, on that note, I want to break down this discussion into three topics. First, it'll be international attention on Lebanon and what that means in terms of risks and potential benefits in the medium to long term. Also, Iran's leverage in Lebanon and what that looks like with a degraded and withered Hezbollah. And this topic will be broken down into 2 points. The first is Lebanese-Iranian relations moving forward with a weakened Hezbollah and what Iran could achieve in the medium to long term, and also economics and what the potential is for a divorce of sorts between Iran and Hezbollah, and what economic development could look like in the south that perhaps curtails Hezbollah's influence in the medium to long term. The third section will be local agency. And that, in the end of the day, really means what the state can do for a war it did not participate, or for that matter, initiate, an agreement that it largely did not contribute to, and also perhaps the limitations if Hezbollah refuses to disarm long term. We'll also get into the monthly progress reports and the wider timeline and all that. Let me begin with a question to both Michael and Albert, and I'll start with you, Michael, if that's okay. Michael, how would you best describe this moment we're living through? And could you also examine the potential benefits and risks when it comes to this version of heightened pressure and real attention on Lebanon, and whether or not the risks could actually spill out into violence on the streets should maximum pressure be applied? So, Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Kulluna Irada, for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here with Albert. Look, I mean, what is this? It's a period of, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, of great uncertainty. And I think because it's a period of great uncertainty, and where making predictions is very difficult, I think we should also keep a mind open that, you know, the sort of traditional way we look at this issue, that Hezbollah will never disarm, that Iran will never budge, that, you know, that we're heading into a confrontation sooner or later. I think we should be a bit careful. I mean, I think all parties are a little bit uncertain at this stage. We've never really, for a long time, we haven't had this level of pressure from Israel, of course, militarily. The United States is, of course, a very unpredictable actor. You know, they are sort of, on the one hand, putting more pressure for quicker action by the Lebanese. This is what we hear from the Ortagus visit yesterday. But at the same time, my understanding is they're also aware of the potential vulnerabilities of the Lebanese system. So it's not black or white. I think all parties are, in a way, entering into new territory. And all I can really say is, as a result of this, I think it's very important not to make hasty decisions. And it's very important not to imagine that impatience can be a strategy. Impatience is not a strategy. Many people would like to see Hezbollah disarmed. I'm one of them, of course. But at the same time, there are many elements of this that have to be carefully taken into consideration. So we don't push ourselves, as you say, into a corner where the only outcome is violence.
Thanks, Michael. And I forgot to add as well before going to Albert, if the audience has questions, just write them in the Zoom call chat box. So Albert, you're perhaps how you would describe this moment and the risks and benefits when it comes to this form of pressure towards Lebanon for disarmament.
Thank you, Ronnie. Also honored and very happy to be here under your guidance and moderation. I enjoy it particularly when I'm not the moderator because I'm quite frustrated by this role. So the moment for me is a transition. This is what would. So transition is always a crisis because crisis is always a period when there is a shift of paradigm. I believe as far as Lebanon is concerned, we are exiting slowly but surely an era of Iranian influence and domination. The outcome and the speed is not yet clear, but for me, definitely it's the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. What makes it uncertain is that I believe that Israel has won the war, but it will lose the peace because they will not know how to transition under the current leadership. This is what we are seeing, at least today. They will not know when and how to stop, and they will continue, which makes it, because everything says that it's the end of the Iranian era and the beginning of a US-led era or an Israeli, a Pax Israeliana in the region. But Israel and Pax, they don't get along well these days together. That's where I agree with Michael that a lot of uncertainties are waiting for us due to the Israeli behavior and how they will handle their relations with Syria, Lebanon, the Palestinians, Egypt, the Gulf. This is very, very uncertain. The benefits and risks, I see a clear benefit, honestly, of the international pressure. Us Lebanese, we don't move unless we are under pressure. And this is no different in the current leadership that we are supportive of. So under President Aoun and the cabinet of Nawaf Salam, I believe that we lost precious time and we lost the momentum. So the cabinet and this whole new governance was put in place in January. And the question of Hezbollah's disarmament was put seriously on the table in the summer. And I believe those 7-8 months are a huge waste of time, not because of the time, because of the momentum. For me, the first meeting of the cabinet should have been to concretize a November arrangement and to proceed with the disarmament after the catastrophic war that we lived last year and the year before. Instead of that, we entered into the Lebanese modus operandi, which is unclear discussions, side discussions, a willingness to preserve some of the old way of doing things. And we lost a lot of momentum. So without international pressure, we wouldn't have moved. So this is the clear benefit. Now, this comes with a risk and also a huge risk because the process, the international process, is uneven, unfair, and it's one-sided. It's clearly a pro-Israeli process and agenda that is being put in place by the US. So my main thesis that I will develop afterwards is that this process must be Lebanese and not internationally led.
Thanks, Albert. And actually, this is a nice segue to go further down and examine the risks or the potential risks. And Michael, I'm going to pull from a recent piece you wrote in Diwan titled Ignore Siren Songs from Washington. And I'm going to quote you a US provoked civil war against Hezbollah that leads to a murderous deadlock is far more perilous than advancing slowly and eventually working out a modus vivendi with the party that avoids domestic conflict. So, if you could expand on that a bit further, and do you believe a confrontation with the army, or for that matter, an insurrection, is likely should maximum pressure be applied on the Lebanese state to disarm Hezbollah?
I think the Lebanese state will resist this kind of pressure, Ronnie. But the point I was making in that is, look, let's look through back at our recent history, and not so recent. I mean, when did the Lebanese army in the last 40 years basically intervene militarily against militias? In the aftermath of the 1982 Israeli invasion, they did move against the Walid Jumblat's PSP and against the Amal movement. And I remember very well in January of 1984, the army was bombing the southern suburbs of Beirut. On the 6th of February, there was an intifada by the militias and they regained control of West Beirut. So this strategy did not work. I mean, it backfired. In 1990, of course, Michel Aoun attacked the Lebanese forces, and we know very well what happened. Other than, for example, the area of Firnes Shebek, there was a deadlock, and a very bloody deadlock between the Lebanese army and the Lebanese forces. In other words, when the army has intervened, what has happened? What happens is what normally should happen in these kinds of situations. You have deadlock. You immediately have a stalemate. And then the army has no option but to increase firepower against civilian areas, which means the army is bombarding its own civilians with increasing, with heavier and heavier weapons. Is this a situation in which Lebanon wants to find itself today? Let me go further. Where are we talking about? We're not talking about a geographically limited entity. The Shia community is distributed between the southern suburbs of Beirut, parts of the south, and of course, the northern Bekaa Valley. I mean, this is a very wide area that you not only have to conquer if you're fighting you're trying to disarm them by force, but you have to basically maintain your control over these areas. And frankly, I don't believe that the Lebanese army today has the ability to maintain control over a population that would have immediately turned hostile because of this resort to military force. So this is my memory that I have, and I with all due respect to the Lebanese army, which has done very good work, but the army has avoided entering into civil conflicts as much as possible. It did succeed in the Fajr al-Jurud operation, if you recall, near Arsaid. It succeeded because it was open territory and they had aerial superiority. But look at Nahr al-Barid. This was not a success. I mean, the army won because it was not conceivable that it could lose in Nahr al-Barid. But the losses were very high, and it took a long time. So I think we should be modest in terms of the capacity of the army to impose a military outcome. And we should be a little bit wary of when people tell us Hezbollah is completely weakened. Hezbollah has the capacity to fight. It may have lost heavy weapons, but at the end of the day, a fight in the streets of different areas of Lebanon will end up, a street fight doesn't require very heavy weapons, and it can very quickly lead to a stalemate. And I'll end here. What we need to remember is that the main objective at the end of the fight, it's not just disarming Hezbollah, it's reintegrating the Shia community into the state. You want to integrate them not through a hostile measure. You want to ensure that they will willingly become, will join, will become loyal to the state like any other community. And I think it's very important to say this. And maybe if I could just throw in one final idea, because I think it's an important one. We have to understand something. There is today the Syrian factor, which many people are not looking. When they look at Hezbollah's weapons, they are not looking at the Syrian factor. There is a fear amongst the Shia of the revanchist mood in Syria. And I know, for example, that there are Shia in the Bekaa Valley who were not with Hezbollah, who were opposed to them, who have now reconciled with them because they feel that Hezbollah is the only force that could help them if there are cross-border raids by the Syrian authorities. I mean, these are things, it's become now a confessional issue, a sectarian issue. So, suddenly when you have sectarian issues, it creates, existential anxieties. And there it becomes even more difficult to try to find a solution that is consensual.
Thanks, Michael. And actually, I'm going to now segue back to what you referred to, Albert, as your thesis, the Lebanonization of this process. And I'm a fan of reading my guests' work prior to doing these panels. So I'm going to quote you, Albert, from a recent piece you wrote in L'Orient Le Jour. It's titled Hezbollah's Disarmament Will Be Lebanese or Will Not Be. And quote, the government must show discernment and avoid simplistic populist positions that could undermine its original intentions, restoring the state's monopoly on arms without concessions or bargaining. So if you could develop this point further, and whether or not you share Michael's concerns that this type of maximum pressure could backfire, could lead to an insurrection towards the Lebanese army. So any thoughts on that and pulling back from your original thesis?
Yes, thank you, Ronnie. I agree and disagree in the same time with Michael. So I believe that the civil strife or the civil war or any comparison with the events of February 84 are a bit misplaced. It's a different context. I don't see ingredients of civil war, and I'm quite afraid that with this argument of civil war, we cannot do anything. So if we were to move towards states building now or tomorrow or after tomorrow, if we are opposed with the argument of civil war, then we will do nothing. And every component, every group, every political party can also put forward this argument. And if we accept, we abide by it, then we are completely neutralized. So I'm quite skeptical about the desire of Lebanese to, particularly the Shia community, to embark into a new adventure, whereas they are cut from any regional supports. Assad regime has fallen. The enemy of us all today, us all Lebanese, is in the sky 24/7, etc. So I believe the military option is not, of course, the ideal way. So for me, it's not the ideal option, but it should be the fact that the state is ready to use coercion to impose its sovereignty should be ideally and in principle should always be the ultimate resort option, but it should be an option. And if it's not, then you have no bargaining power over the process. We must do everything in our power to avoid that. So I hope that no one will understand me wrong. Today, for me, the departure point is that Hezbollah's weapons are sterilized, to use an economic term. They are sterilized because they cannot be used. They are obsolete. They cannot put them out of a bunker because you have Israeli surveillance, etc. For me, also, they cannot, or it's very difficult for Hezbollah to use them internally, because to use your weaponry in the internal arena, you must have some kind of legitimacy. You must cover it with allies. So Hezbollah have done it very well with FPM, with the Awnis. before. They had a cover, a Christian cover, a Druze cover, etc., to be able to use their weapons in the in internal arena. So today it's very difficult. So the departure point is that those weapons are sterilized, and the arrival point should be that those weapons are brought back or given back to, or given, not back, given to the Lebanese government. Every mean of pressure is legitimate. So we must use this international pressure. We must make it clear that the state will never compromise on that, even if it must use power. And here also I disagree. I hate to disagree with Michael because I agree with him most of the time. Nahr al-Bared for me was a very, very positive example in the history of Lebanon, even with the casualties, because the state, because I believe that the calculation of the Palestinian factions that did that at the time, and Hezbollah opposed a military action, was that the state would never dare, and the state dared. And we are using this example and building on this example until now, 20 years after. So we must avoid violence, but make it clear that we will not compromise. How to do that? By Lebanization of the issue. I'm very critical of the internationalization of the issue of disarmament of Hezbollah. It is as if Morgan Ortagus or Mr. Barak invented that concept or socialized that concept of disarmament of Hezbollah, or as if this concept is new. We forget that it's been 25 years that we've been struggling to disarm Hezbollah, that you had a movement called March 14 that lost many fine people in the struggle, that were assassinated. So this is a local demand in the name of the constitution, in the name of the pact, in the name of every state building concept. It's a local issue. And today, what's new is that even Hezbollah and the Shia community, we have the proof that Hezbollah cannot defend Lebanon, that the arms of Hezbollah caused a catastrophe, not the first one, the second, and the third one. Because for me, 2006 was a catastrophe, and all the adventures of Hezbollah were. So today, based on that, we can say, let's get back to Lebanon. Not let's go back to the arrangement with Israel, because this is very shaky, Ronnie. The arrangement are very fragile, and I believe that the international mediation is perceived, and it is unfair. So when you have no condemnation of Israel, when you have Israel that is still occupying 5 or 6 points inside Lebanon, when you have progress by the Lebanese government that are not met by anything tangible by the Israeli side or even by the international community, we cannot bet on this. We should bet and come back to the Lebanese fundamentals. There is no state without the monopoly of violence.
Thanks, Albert. And just a short follow-up question to both, and I'll start with you, Michael. In retrospect, international attention on this country looks fleeting, whether it's the mid-1980s or whether it's the post-2005 era Albert was alluding to. Do you see a potential scenario, which could be the worst-case scenario, that a new status quo emerges, where Hezbollah remains armed indefinitely, the Israelis are in the south indefinitely, international pressure disappears, and Lebanon is left with the status quo that looks like failure long-term, that Lebanon cannot really disarm on its own, with the risks and benefits included as well. So is there the potential for that to happen because international attention in retrospect is short-term?
Yeah, no, look, and I mean, the question is a good one because it allows me also a bit to clarify my thought here. I'm not saying no violence should be used. What I'm saying is, and I certainly agree with Albert on the idea that the state should retain a monopoly over violence. This should be a principle, and it should use, if it has to use violence, it should use it sparingly. in specific instances, for example, if the army wants to remove weapons from a location and there is resistance from Hezbollah, the army should deploy troops to prevent any kind of intervention by the militia. I'm not saying that the army should simply not use any violence and that's that. I also think we need to discuss what kind of weapons are we talking about. Are today we suggesting that the army should disarm Hezbollah members of their personal weapons? I don't think that this is a plan that the army that is very realistic. I mean, everyone has personal weapons in Lebanon. I think what we're really talking about is the heavy weapons. So to circle back to your question, I do worry because if we don't progress on this disarmament question, Israel will continue to occupy land. It will do what it's doing now. It will probably widen its areas of occupation, and it will continue to hit Hezbollah. So definitely, I don't believe in a status quo. Definitely, we do need to progress on this front, even if it does involve pushing here and there. Let me be very clear. But what I'm saying is we should be very cautious in what we decide to do and when we use force. Okay? And I gave the examples from the past. I honestly, I don't think they're time sensitive. I really think that we would find ourselves in very similar situations today. And here it's my turn, regrettably, to disagree with Albert. I think that once you have deadlock, you have deadlock. Once you have stalemate, you have stalemate. The natural reaction of any armed force when it faces stalemate is to raise the firepower. And we know very well how this can escalate and it can become very problematic. So definitely, I think we're not in a situation that is, we're in a dynamic situation. The Israelis, let me sort of describe what I think is the likely outcome. I don't think there is any really silver bullet that will resolve the issue of Hezbollah's weapons. I think the Lebanese state is going to continue to try to raise the pressure by containing Hezbollah physically, geographically, by preventing contact between the different areas of the country that would allow the party to move its weapons. We've seen that it took a decision on, these passes that they used to use to go by roadblocks, that they've made that no longer acceptable. Now, this is not going to fundamentally change anything, but what they're doing is slowly but surely, they're eroding the element of legitimacy and the maneuverability that the party had. In other words, any kind of movement that they spot, they now have a legitimate reason to forcibly prevent this. Unlike the situation, for example, in Kahali, when they got the weapons and probably afterwards gave it back to Hezbollah. Today, the army and the state has a legitimate reason to confiscate weapons. And they now have a reason for the army to intervene in force to impose the decisions of the government. So, slowly but surely, they will sort of try to reduce as much as possible the margin of maneuver of Hezbollah. I think the Israelis will continue to attack like they're doing now for the time being. They may escalate their attacks. But I think Adver said something very interesting, is that the Israelis have a tendency through their violence to spoil the outcome that they actually want to achieve. So if they escalate beyond a certain level, it could very much create an obstacle for the disarmament process. And at the same time, I do believe that Hezbollah from its end will try to find political ways to avoid a confrontation with the state. If there is room for negotiation, Hezbollah will go for negotiation. In other words, I don't think it's a coincidence that we had, a week, 10 days ago, the proposal or the sort of implicit proposal of Ali Fayyad and Ali Hassan al-Khalil, the idea being that if we implement political reforms and the Taif agreement in its entirety, then, they didn't say this, but they implied it, that we could put weapons on the table. In other words, if we surrender our weapons, we want something in the state. This was the implicit message. And then we saw the speech on Friday of Naim Qasim. The point is, all sides are looking for little outlets that can lead in the direction of progress. If it doesn't go quickly enough, as I said, I think the Israelis are going to accelerate, or they're going to, they will increase their pressure, and the Americans are already putting more pressure. Fine, this is a given, and we understand this. So we do need to move forward, but we have to do this carefully and try to search for openings. And we do need, I really do think there are other elements that we have to discuss. And we can come back to this, Ronnie, but there is the fact that, you know this because you asked me, you did an interview with me on this. We do need to lay down some kind of connection with the Iranians to talk about this. And we do need, I recognize Iranian problems in Lebanon for a long time, but we do need, they're the ultimate decision maker on weapons. We need to know how they're thinking. And I do think we need to calm the situation with Syria. We need to somehow neutralize any perception of threat from the Syrian side. And maybe I
Thanks,
could
Michael.
just answer a quick question by Diana. Are the Syrians going to enter Lebanon? Probably not. But they have advanced in areas in Jird Arsal, in the areas east of Arsal. They have advanced into Lebanese territory, and then the army flew drones over them, and they retreated. So I wouldn't put this out of the question.
Thanks, Michael. And before we jump into that subject, which is important, it's critical, Iran's leverage in Lebanon, Albert, was there anything you'd like to add to what Michael said? And if you could just, if you feel like this is a fleeting moment and we may see repetition, the way we've already outlined, where American and international pressure fades and Lebanon, in a way, relives the status quo none of us would like to see reemerge.
Yes, Ronnie. Yeah, this is one of my biggest fears, actually, is that the international, we are already not very senior or on top of the international community, particularly the American preoccupations in the world. So the strategic value of Lebanon is quite low. My biggest fear is a prolonged status quo where we see the state, the actual government or the state, it will still function. The sky will belong to the Israeli. Hezbollah will not be disarmed. We will be living under constant threat. So we will have incursions and operations and bombings, sometime in Beirut from time to time. So it's a state of instability. And as you know, us Lebanese, we get used to things quite fast. So this could be our new reality. And then a disengagement of the US followed by other powers, and the rise of Turkey maybe, or the division of influence in the region between Turkey and Israel. So we become a battleground of a tier 3 battleground for local militias with a semblance of state still there. So this is something realistic. This could happen. So we must be aware. That's why the answer to that is to progress, dynamism, to achieve. So, and here, of course, I agree with Michael. So yes, for me, phase 1 is Hezbollah lost its legitimacy officially, and that's the importance of August decision by the government. We needed those decisions. Phase 2, containment, sterilization, increased pressure by some concrete actions south of Litani to annul all those laissez-passer, the cards that allow Hezbollah to move, etc. So increased pressure. And for me, the resolution will be a mix of coercion and persuasion. We need the two ingredients. As it happened when the Syrian took the country in the early 90s. So they defeated militarily Michel Aoun and exiled the Kataib, etc. And they persuaded Samir Sharjah to join the new era. So it's definitely something that's gonna look like that. And to persuade, you need to have arguments of persuasion. And the argument of persuasion are this Lebanization. And here I could I can talk about that in length. What does it mean? But I believe I'll leave Michael maybe comment on Iran, and we will come back to that.
We will end with the Lebanonization, or at least
Yeah.
the local dimension to this subject. But let's get into Iran. And I have two separate questions. And the first goes to you, Michael. And thanks for referring to our recent podcast episode, which was titled Engaging Iran. It pulled from another recent piece you wrote for Carnegie's Diwan titled Hezbollah's Margin is Tightening. And it's almost a description of the missing link from the Lebanese government's decision to move ahead with sub-state disarmament. And I'm going to quote you, Hezbollah's weapons are effectively controlled by Iran. So is this a suggestion for track two like diplomacy from the Lebanese state, or using your words, quiet diplomacy between designated Lebanese and Iranian officials? And long term, what does Iranian leverage look like with a weakened Hezbollah? So, in other words, does Iran still have that chief role to play? What can Iran do to prevent disarmament from happening long term? And does Iran even care to listen? And I think that's a bigger question, maybe there's no answer yet, but is Iran interested in that type of dialogue with Lebanon? So I'll give you the floor, Michael.
Look, yes, to answer the question, is Iran interested in a dialogue? Yes. I mean, when Larijani came to Lebanon, I think there were two objectives. He wanted to say, Iran is, you have to deal with us. You know, you cannot circumvent Iran. We have our say. But I think there was another element that people tended to overlook. It's that he realized, I'm sure he realized, that, you know, the Lebanese, something had changed in Lebanon. In other words, for the president and prime minister to basically explain to him that, you know, this is a decision we've taken, a sovereign decision, and we insist on taking this decision, meant, you know, I think was a very clear statement to him. And I think Larijani traditionally is not seen as someone who is, you know, someone who wants to conduct foreign policy through the Revolutionary Guard. I mean, this is my understanding. This is someone who deals, you know, who now has the authority that was given to him by Khamenei. And I actually, his visit, I found very interesting and, believe it or not, a little bit positive. Why do I say this? Because I think it opened the door for an alternative, you know, a potentially alternative path for dealing with Iran. I'm not saying there will be this, but potentially a door was opened. And I think this door may actually lead, if it's exploited properly, at least, first of all, from the Lebanese perspective, a clear idea of what the Iranian thinking on Lebanon is, which we don't know enough about. That's number one. To see what is a potential deal that the Iranians may be willing to consider. And as I said, these two events are not, for me, anodyne. The Naim Qasim speech on Friday and the statement in the subcommittee on elections by Ali Hassan al-Khalil and with him Ali Fayyad, where they threw out for the first time a little tidbit, the idea being political gains in exchange for weapons. I don't think that the Iranians are absent here, okay? I don't see today that the Iranians are foolish enough to go back to the notion of recreating the axis of resistance. Albert is right, Hezbollah is isolated. They're on their own, their legitimacy has been questioned. But this is one thing that worries me. It's that when you're isolated and alone, this is when you want to fight back, okay? This is why the violence path is one we have to be careful about. But in terms of Iran, I actually think that there may be a room to exploit here, if only to understand better their thinking. As I said, let's not go beyond that in terms of expectations. The idea that we should be completely under the boot of the United States and Morgan Ortagus is, I think, a very bad idea. We cannot isolate ourselves from the United States, but at the end of the day, I like to think that we're a sovereign country, and therefore it's in our interest to deal with many actors. And you know, if there was one message from the Qasim remarks on Saudi Arabia, it was basically to say that Iranian-Saudi relations in Lebanon are not a zero-sum game. So I just think that this can be exploited better so that we reach an understanding of what potential political solutions we can find to Hezbollah's weapons.
Thanks. And Michael, just a short follow-up to the question, can anything be done without engagement with Iran?
I think it'll be very difficult. I think that I think the Iranians have said this is our card. We're not willing to give up a card for nothing in exchange. I think they've made this clear. You know, look, the Iranians today look at their regional situation. They've been attacked by Israel. They were attacked by the United States. Their axis of resistance is now in a shambles. Okay. They have basically, in the space of 1 year, a bit more, lost many of their strongest cards. Today, they see the disarmament of Hezbollah as another effort to remove what remains of their cards. I think their thinking is, well, we cannot allow ourselves to lose all our cards. But if this is a card, it means that you may be willing to negotiate over this card. Okay? I don't think that they're going to resort to force to preserve this card. I really don't think this. And I think the appointment of Larijani to deal with the Lebanese issue was an interesting one. It doesn't suggest that the option is to escalate. But if they're attacked, it may actually, you know, make a harsh decision in Tehran easier to reach. If they're attacked, then you may see those who are willing to compromise in Tehran, you know, less willing, they'll have a tighter margin of maneuver.
Thanks, Michael. And Albert, I'm going to jump a bit towards your piece in Lorient Le Jour, the one that I've referenced already. Hezbollah's disarmament will be Lebanese or will not be. And I'm going to quote you, the Lebanese state must reassure the Shia community while avoiding the replacement of excessive power with institutional deadlock that would make Lebanon even more ungovernable. So, segue from diplomacy to economic development. Do you see increased government jurisdiction providing a possible divorce of sorts between what Iran funds and what Hezbollah's base depends on? And is there a healthier state-driven economic process that steers the community back towards local authority and the state?
Yes, Ronnie, to be clear, and here words are important, I see no divorce possible between Hezbollah and Iran. Hezbollah, for me, at least, is an emanation of Iran. But what's interesting is that to me, it was always very puzzling and a matter of great curiosity to see how the Iranian regime and Hezbollah, with its proxy Hezbollah, were able to win the hearts because they enjoy a true popularity within the Shia community in Lebanon of a large majority, not all, of course, of the Shia, but they are very representative in the Shia, while they are very, very different. So historically, religiously, the Jabal Amil school, the Lebanese Shia, are very, very different from the Iranian Wali al-Faqih dogma. It's totally incompatible with this Lebanese tradition of Shiism. And the Lebanese Shia are very, very liberal and quite opposed to the, let's say, obscurantist tradition imported by the mullah regime in Iran. So, but despite all that, they succeeded. And this is very, very telling. This means that we have, Ronnie, a problem. And us Lebanese, we always tend to put the problem on foreigners, and we never give enough importance to the domestic to the domestic reasons and the reasons that we can, in fact, influence. So I believe, I'm not a sociologist, or I don't want to be pretentious, but what we can extract maybe as lessons or in summary or as shallow lessons, that the Iranian power gave something to this community, and the bargain was that we are ready to accept what you gave us and to let go some of our freedom, tradition, whether religious or sociological. So the first one, which is quite obvious, and I believe that we are not emphasizing enough in the political discourse today on this, is the protection vis-à-vis Israel. And so we must not forget that Israel is still and will be a major threat to Lebanon, particularly on the residents that are frontliners, so the Shia, today and tomorrow, because geographically this is the case. So the state must do much more in rhetorics and also practically to give this impression or in reality to defend Lebanese against those aggression. And here I'm very critical of the international also engagement, because the international engagement is not at all efficient in this field. The second one is the welfare. So where the state was absent, Hezbollah filled the void. So until now, we are talking about the institutions that were created, and the state is trying to dismantle some of them, like Al-Qard al-Hassan or so on, Jihad al-Bina and other institutions. So Hezbollah was very efficient in filling the void. The third one is the political social contract. So I perceive Lebanon to be an arena of confessional groups that are fighting over central power, Ronnie. And all those groups somehow or somewhere or in a given time in history were assisted or called for foreign intervention to be able to dominate the others in their own country. And also the Shia community is no different from that. And the community gained a lot of power from Hezbollah's arm. So this is where we are today. This is in summary. So how to resolve that? How to dialogue with that? Is it by another confessional contract, or by paving the way to the emergence of a modern state, of a modern social contract, of acknowledging that all the Lebanese groups went through that process, and it's time to date for state building on fair basis. All that needs a lot of work, a lot of rhetorics, a lot of confidence building. It's necessary to win back the heart of the Shia to the Lebanese Republic, and I don't think this is a given. And I would put much more effort on that than what is being put today.
Thanks, Albert. And we can circle back to Iran at the end if necessary, but I'd like to take the conversation now to the...
And sorry, Ronnie, excuse me for the interruption. The bargaining that is being perceived by some, the political bargaining, so let's change a bit, modify the constitution against the disarmament, is very, very dangerous, because this is another round of Lebanese way of doing things. And if we take the disarmament and we give an institutional veto, because today we are in a quasi-situation of institutional veto given to a community. So the Shia community imposed, Nabih Berri imposed a quasi-institutional veto. You know very well that the Minister of Finance is Shia, and unfortunately, this government abided by this non-written, unconstitutional, totally unfair now tradition to be. And this is a big handicap or roadblock towards the emergence of an efficient functioning state. And the powers that are de facto given to the president or to the Speaker of the House are unparalleled in any other system in the world. So if we were to disarm But to enshrine those prerogatives and to increase them, we would reach also a deadlock, but a political deadlock. So this must be done really in a modern, in a third republic style of philosophy. I might sound a bit like a dreamer, but this is very important to be tackled correctly.
Thanks, Albert. And we can actually touch on. Oh, sorry, Michael, you wanted to add something.
No, I think that Albert raised a very important point, and I agree actually exactly what he's saying. The issue of what emerges from any kind of discussion over political reform is not just a question of, implementing what in Ta'if, what was not implemented. The fact is that most communities in Lebanon today agree that the system at present isn't working. There are many dimensions that would have to be brought into the mix. And I think that in a way you could not do it without some kind of constitutional convention. In other words, Albert says he's a dreamer, but I think realistically speaking, if we don't have something like this, if you're going to, for example, go to Ta'if and remove political confessionalism, you have to go to the Christians and offer them some element that even goes beyond decentralization, administrative decentralization, as was offered in Ta'if. Okay, there will also be a Sunni Shia issue to resolve. These are not things that can be resolved easily, but any kind of if we open the constitution up for a third republic, the prerequisite of this has to be disarmament prior to any discussion on constitutional reform. In other words, the point I'm making is, rather than moving into a system that will actually be more blockage along the lines of what Albert was saying, is on the contrary, we have to go to a constitutional convention to try to prevent the re-emergence of a system that has really instaured these completely unconstitutional measures, such as the issue of the finance minister, such as the power of the president of parliament to ignore the constitution when he wants. This is a big issue, and I fear that the issue of disarmament cannot be separated from a much wider issue, which is effectively the emergence, a consensual emergence of a third republic. I think this is a very important point that Albert raises.
Thanks, Michael. And I'm going to wrap up the discussion on the local aspect, and this will tie us back to what Albert you were referring to at the beginning. In a way, some skepticism with the slowness of the Lebanese state to make this a priority. And I'd like to start with you, Albert, with a question of how would you measure success and failure when it comes to the Lebanese government's stated goal of sub-state disarmament? We've seen deadlines that were shelved. This end of year deadline is no longer being discussed. There's a looser time frame of up to 15 months, I think, which takes us into 2027, and monthly progress reports that were largely applauded by Hezbollah as well. So how would you measure success and failure today with this current government?
Listen, progress. So success is progressing. So it's a funnel. It's to funnel and to increase pressure by, it can be done geographically, or as we are witnessing with the Palestinian camps, so to be done in batches, or so you have this disarmament KPIs. You have also the state building KPIs. So to win back the heart of the Shia community, this is very, very important. And so this is also a KPI to have more and more people that are openly opposing Hezbollah's weapon from the Shia community, more and more people that are imposing themselves politically, that are proposing alternatives to Hezbollah and Amal also to a large extent. And the third KPI is the return of stability and defending Lebanese in the south and elsewhere. So when we look at all that, it's easier said than done. It must be simultaneous, because you cannot disarm efficiently and realistically if you do not provide a minimum of stability. All of that should be Lebanized. Lebanized by, once again, what I mean by Lebanized is it's not dictated by a foreign agenda, by foreign process, foreign principles. It has no organic relation with what Israel is doing. Lebanization means the constitution, respect the pact, emergence of a new form of governance, new discussion, emergence of modernity, replying to the aspiration of the Lebanese people, putting back Lebanon on the map. This is Lebanization. It's an internal process that is being led by Lebanon, not by foreign envoys who come parade in Lebanon and go back and they shake all the country. This is very destructive, I believe, in terms of value and perception. So I agree that this must be done not in a hasty manner, but in an organized, engineered manner. But the objective must be clear, and the use of force, this is what I said in the beginning, it must be very clear to everyone that we will never compromise on the end game. So we are not negotiating to see whether it will happen or not. This will happen because a republic is built on a monopoly of violence. This is a constituting principle of any country in the world, but at our own rhythm, with our own discussions and conditions and ecosystem, etc., not something led by any foreign power.
Thanks. And Michael, I'll add to the question. So we've already seen the short-term dialogue intention from Joseph Aoun that came and went, replaced by what we have now, which is the cabinet decree and the extended time frame. But the emphasis to disarm remains. Action on the ground, it's probably too early to tell. How you would measure success and failure with this short-term government. And add to that, does the chance for wider regional war in a way replace everything we've talked about? That if this issue is effectively kicked, if the can is kicked so far down the road, can you see the chances of war resuming in a way that's more reminiscent of 2024?
Yes, if there is open-ended, if we don't understand that this is not an open-ended process, war can resume and probably will resume. And I think it'll be worse than 2024, because this time the Israelis will say the Lebanese state is responsible, and they may not limit their attacks to primarily Shia places of Shia concentration. So in that level, yes, I think so. But sorry, the first part of the question was
how you would measure success and failure today with the Lebanese government's task disarmament?
I think look, the Lebanese plan has basically 3 stages. The key stage is stage 1, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, stage 2 is a stage where you get into 1559, if you want. 1701 south of the Litani is a key stage in terms of a key benchmark. If the Lebanese state and the army can significantly remove heavy weapons or the weapons from south of the Litani, this is already a major step forward, because, as you know, the Israelis have options today, and one of their options is to move in up to the Litani. I mean, this is a potential threat that they don't say it, but you understand that this is very much on their mind. And what worries me is that the Israelis don't have good intentions here. I think the idea of Israeli expansionism should not be taken lightly. I think if you give them an opportunity, they will take land and they'll try to keep it, especially this government. So I think the thing is what to prioritize first. And south of the Litani is, of course, a key first step. And then move very quickly to the area between the Litani and the Awali. Okay, so the question of South Lebanon is really something the government cannot waste any more time on. And to be frank, I think this is something we have basically a timeline of what, 3 to 6 months maximum to basically try as much as possible to clear these areas out. What happens afterwards in the areas outside these zones, it may be a bit looser. I mean, but at this point, South Lebanon has to be demilitarized if the Lebanese government wants to retain its credibility. And if I'm using a 6-month time frame, we're talking roughly, up to the elections of next year. In other words, there is time, I think, to significantly progress on this front, I think, assuming elections take place on time. But definitely, I think that if we don't show that we can reach these key benchmarks, which is, the Americans love this term, always a benchmark, or, you've done this, you've done that. If we don't show this, definitely the probability of Israeli escalation will go up. And we saw the statement of Lindsey Graham when he came to Beirut last. The next day he went to Tel Aviv and he made what I thought was a very threatening statement, and he repeated it, I believe, yesterday, the so-called Plan B. I really think that Lindsey Graham is much more of a spokesman of the possibility of American intentions than Tom Barak, who it seems now has been pushed out of the picture by Ortagus. And Ortagus, I think, is someone with whom Lindsey Graham is comfortable, and the Israelis are comfortable. So I am worried about this.
Thank you both, Michael and Albert. I'm going to skim through the questions, and I may ask one or two myself towards the end. But I'll start with a question from Diana Menem, the director of Kulluna Irada. And it's a question to you, Michael. This goes back to the diplomacy and engagement with the Iranian regime. And Diana asks, what would the Iranians want in return for the Hezbollah quote card? And what leverage do they have left in Lebanon?
Well, what they want, I don't know what they want, but I believe that there may be an indication through these sort of small statements from Ali Fayyad and Ali Hassan al-Khalil. If they're going to give up their weapons, they do want to play a significant role within the Lebanese political system. They want to compensate for what they lose in terms of leverage by having it replaced by political power. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. We have to, I don't want to guess in their place, but I think this is what they're looking for. And I suspect this is what the Iranians are looking for. If they can't maintain weapons, why not at least name an army commander? Okay. It's indirectly, you're talking about a major role in the state and in defending against Israel. But of course, this was going to create, they believe that this will create many problems within the Lebanese sectarian system. So they could be using this both as a maneuver and as a signal of what they want to accept, what they need, what is their minimal condition for disarmament. I suspect this is the thinking along the Iranian minds, in Iranian minds as well. In terms of leverage, I think Iran does have leverage because it continues to have, of course, a say in Hezbollah's decisions. Yes.
Thank you.
They have leverage.
Thanks. And actually, this is a question from Bassem Snaji. It's for you, Albert. Without international pressure, we wouldn't have moved. And the question is, if international pressure moves us, are we really moving at all? And this harkens back to national momentum. What about our own national movement agency? If we have none, will we not simply disappear?
Bassem's questions are always difficult, but I enjoyed
I
them.
hope I read that correctly. Sorry.
No, listen, I believe I already answered that question. Yes, international pressure is important. I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe that we wouldn't have moved without international pressure. Is it, I believe the sense of the question is, when we move under international pressure, are we really moving and can we build on that? Yes, I believe we can. There is no question today that Hezbollah's legitimacy, institutional legitimacy, is far worse, or it's close to zero today, and this is something we can build on. Before we had the ministerial declarations who used to cover for Hezbollah's weapon. Now we don't have that. So this is always incremental, but I agree with Bassam that only a Lebanese organic solution, and this was the sense of practically everything I've said, would guarantee something, a stability to build on and a sustainable solution to Hezbollah's weapon. Even the discussion with Iran, you need to have a favorable bargaining power, because no one's going to give you that. I don't believe Lebanon is as relevant on the international or on the big menu of the international community's discussion with Iran. I don't believe it's a big ask. So this could play against us, not in favor of us. So we need to have a favorable bargaining power, even with Iran, to be able to impose something while discussing with Iran. And this is today largely not the case. And this is where we should progress.
Thank you. I'm going to actually combine a few questions here, and this is both to you, Michael and Albert. From Joe M. and Antoine Damus, does Hezbollah still have sufficient funds to pay salaries to its members, as well as financial compensation for those who lost their homes? I know there was a recent announcement of something like $3 billion in reconstruction aid. But the question includes, what about cutting the finances of Hezbollah? Is it feasible? And would it be effective for disarmament itself? So, Michael, I'll let you begin.
I don't know. Maybe Albert should. I'm sure he has a better financial sense than I do. Maybe he should start on this.
Okay. Albert?
What I can say is that definitely Hezbollah is suffering from, let's say, drying finances, and also from the pressure on the channels of financing. So today there is a very close scrutiny on all the channels that are typically used to finance Hezbollah. So the result today on the ground is that Hezbollah, yes, is still paying. There is cash that is still arriving. Today, Tom Barak estimated that at $60 million per month. You have other estimations that talk about $1 billion per year. So we know that you have still some money, cash money, that is coming to Lebanon. We know that Hezbollah paid the victims, but not as promised. So we know practically that they paid around $10,000 to $15,000 for damaged houses, that their social security apparatus is still somehow functioning, but at a low regime. So they are still there, but not with the opulence or with the means that they had before. I believe the cash economy is a big problem in Lebanon, and the cash economy is a result. It's not a cause, because also this cash economy issue is being used also as a main theme for pro-banks narrative, to also finger point on other culprits than the banks. So this is another story. But the cash economy, we will not resolve the cash economy. It's very difficult to curtail Hezbollah's financing with the cash economy that we have today. And it's very difficult to curtail the cash economy if we don't have functioning banks. And we cannot have functioning banks without a bank resolution, a proper bank resolution framework. So everything is linked. And maybe a last point that I recently learned by studying a bit more in depth the subject is the extensive and the huge role of cryptocurrencies in Lebanon. So cryptocurrency is a real problem because this escapes any kind of regulation, and you have a lot of small cash dispensers, let's say, that would convert Bitcoins or other crypto into cash. And I had serious estimations from people that are close to the central bank and some researchers that talk of $20 billion per year and even more, 20 to 30 billion, not all linked to Hezbollah, of course, but linked to licit and illicit activities. So crypto is a huge issue when we talk about Hezbollah financing. Last is also a growing reluctance in Iran. The funding of Hezbollah is largely unpopular in Iran. It has been so for the last 15 years, and this is something growing. So maybe the salvation could come from there.
Thanks, Albert. And actually, a question for you, Michael. Another question from Diana Menem. This is going back to how Hezbollah perceives the Syrian regime today. And how plausible is a Syrian attack on Hezbollah? And I'll let you answer what you want from that question. But I think it points back to what you said as well, that their focus is less and less on Israel and more on the Syrian regime.
Yeah, I mean, how plausible? We know that Syrian forces have advanced in the sort of the Jrud Arsail, east of Arsail. As I said, they advance and they move back. I mean, I don't see an attack by the Syrians as very likely, but clearly there an issue that goes much deeper than just the Syrian regime has a lot to be angry for in terms of Hezbollah's performance in Syria. And this is not something that they're willing to forget very quickly. So, it's the threat that counts. It's today, the people in the Bekaa Valley are not fearing tomorrow an attack, but they fear generally a sense of vulnerability towards this border that to their mind may not be as well protected with the Lebanese army as they would like. And this is the problem. The problem is really perceptions. Do I really see the Syrian army moving into Lebanon? I don't think so. I mean, it would be a very stupid move on the one hand. It would rally the Lebanese against Syria to Hezbollah's side. It would actually strengthen Hezbollah. I mean, I think many Lebanese would be very angry with this. We know, of course, our relationship in the past with the Syrians. So I don't really see this as at this point as a realistic option. But as I said, it's the perception that creates anxieties within the community, perceptions of vulnerability.
Thanks. And now a question for you, Albert. I'm going to combine two questions from Malik and Hassan Ramadan. So regarding Hezbollah's legitimacy, what about their scores in all recent elections? And in terms of disarmament, do you think the government should start first to get the trust of the population by providing what the population needs first: education, health, work, food, living, and so on, instead of showing a, quote, foreign agenda? So I'll let you answer that.
Yes, this is in line a bit with my previous comments, Ronnie. So the legitimacy, I stated multiple times during this talk that they have a very high legitimacy, a very high popular attachment. And I even try to analyze why it was the case. But when I said zero legitimacy, I meant their weapons were kind of legitimized by the ministerial declarations. And today, they have zero legitimacy, zero legal and institutional legitimacy to retain their weapons. Now, yes, this is a demand by their popular base. Very good, but this is in total contradiction with all the text and spirit and principles that form any state or government in the world. As for Malik's comment, I don't believe it's a condition precedent, let's say it like that, because fulfilling social welfare as a condition to disarmament is closer to, we say in French, raquette. So we are, I believe we can say that also in English. So and it's a never-ending situation. So we cannot fulfill all social demands before implementing state building principles. So no, but what I'm saying is that we must showcase the state. We must embody the state. We must give signs of social welfare. So the short answer is we must accompany the disarmament process by a new social contract that has been lacking in Lebanon since decades. And it doesn't concern just the Shia, it concerns everyone. Every Lebanese is suffering from a lack of social contract and lack of welfare. So this should be an accompaniment, not a prerequisite.
Thanks. And I'll ask the first question from Sherbil George Haji. Is Hezbollah regenerating itself? And I'll add to that Tom Barak's statements, I believe today, condemning the Lebanese state for not taking more action to what he refers to as Hezbollah's recent growth or regrowth following the war. Is there anything to what he said? Is Hezbollah regenerating? And is Tom Barak pointing at what could be, in a sense, that there is limited international pressure, like we talked about earlier, and that he's putting the onus on the Lebanese state to do more, with maybe a hint of retribution? So maybe I can start with you, Michael.
Ronnie, I wish I don't know, frankly. I mean, I'm not, I don't know the secrets of Hezbollah, what they're doing behind the scenes. I mean, I assume, yes. I mean, of course, I assume that in the last year, the party has been regenerating itself. They've been organizing themselves, replacing people who were killed last year. I don't think the Iranians have been idle on this front, you know, and so I have a deep conviction that they are. I mean, this is one of the reasons I keep saying we must keep the military option really in reserve, because you know, this is a party that today is facing a lot of political problems and political challenges, but militarily they will be able to, I think, strengthen themselves enough to prevent any military offensive against them. But with respect to Barak's statement, you know, I have to be honest, I'm a little bit puzzled today, and this is a parallel issue. Who is dealing with Lebanon amongst the Americans? I don't know. You know, we have a general who is at the head of this mechanism in Lebanon. We never hear him. He never says anything. This mechanism is a failure. We have Ortagus coming with Barak. Who speaks for the US administration? No one has any idea. You know, when Barak made a number of statements in the past, you had the pro-Israel think tanks in the United States demanding his resignation. You just have Laura Loomer demanding his resignation today. In other words, you have this American confusion that is making it very difficult to understand who speaks for what in the United States in terms of Lebanon policy. We don't know. My view, as I said, is that when Ortagus came last time, it was because someone wanted Ortagus to keep an eye on Barak. And you had with her Lindsey Graham. Why was Lindsey Graham here? Because Lindsey Graham has the trust of the Israelis. And so you had Graham watching Ortagus, watching Barak. This is maybe I'm wrong, but this is how I grossly interpreted what's going on. And what worries me is that we're going to see a tightening of the American position in the coming weeks and months. And in fact, I would, if I wanted to understand Barak statements, I would actually say that Barak, if he wants to protect his position, may also have to be pushed into a harder line just to be able to preserve himself with regard to the people on his right. And you have to understand that Barak actually has a very difficult portfolio. He's dealing with Erdogan and the Turks, who have many enemies in Washington. He's dealing with Ahmed al-Shara, who has many enemies in Washington. Everyone he's dealing with is creating enmities for him, you see. And so I'm not surprised, I would not be surprised to see Barak, in a way to protect his position, lean more towards the right in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Michael. Albert, anything to add on that?
No, I totally agree. The American dynamics is today very confused and confusing. And you have a tendency also to do more to protect. So Barak's comment are a shift in the narrative that are clearly, for me, but we never know for sure, are here to protect him from his right flank, and he has been under a lot of criticism, as everyone knows. Is Hezbollah rebuilding? Naturally, we would say yes. It must definitely rebuild its structure, fill the chain of command. Don't forget that maybe 5,000 of its members lost their lives. So definitely it's restructuring. Will it be a threat to Israel anytime soon? Personally, I don't believe it can. I don't believe it will have the military deterrence power anytime soon, or in any scenario except something really totally disruptive. But I see Hezbollah as being done militarily. This is a defeat that you cannot overcome easily. Now, the translation of that will take time, but I don't see Hezbollah rebuilding itself as a military power anytime soon.
Thanks, Albert. And I'm going to actually ask another question, and it may be premature to ask this, but UNIFIL is being drawn down the end of 2026, and this will be the first time since 1969 that the Lebanese army claims exclusive control over southern Lebanon. So the question is Lebanon in a position to inherit UNIFIL's phased withdrawal? And do you imagine an indirect mechanism emerging that replaces UNIFIL's interlocutors with international actors, or for that matter, something that goes back to what never took hold, the May 17, 1983 tripartite agreement? So, Albert, I'll start with you and end it with Michael.
Yes, the UNIFIL, honestly, I'm also quite skeptical and quite concerned by this last prorogation of the mandate of the UNIFIL. I believe the UNIFIL and having international Peace Corps is something positive for Lebanon, especially that the main mission of the UNIFIL, which is to confirm Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon, hasn't been fulfilled yet. So for me, we should, us Lebanese, lobby, push. I know that the French had this position. The US were very critical of UNIFIL. Israel is very critical of UNIFIL. So I believe this is an asset to Lebanon, and we should try, push, lobby to extend once again the mandate of UNIFIL, or to replace it by something similar under the UN or Arab Peace Corps, or I don't know. Having European or international servicemen on the ground is always something positive. So for the wider coalition possible, ideally under UN auspices. So this is for the UNIFIL. As for May 17 and more broadly normalization, I believe what we must today, the debate must change around this issue. What we must clarify, or this is my personal position, and this is very personal, is that there is no dogmatic or structural or historical or ideological or religious reason that would prevent us from normalizing or from having a peace agreement with Israel. But we have a lot of issues that need to be resolved, and as a state, we must do what is our today. What is our what do we need from this issue? And we have the issue of the border, the land border, we have the issues of compensation. So talking about peace today while we are being bombed by Israel seems a bit surreal to me, but we must make it clear that nothing would prevent that scenario from happening, and we are ready to engage in a pacification process, in a stabilization process, but we have 5-6 main issues: the Palestinian refugees, the compensation, the land. We have many issues that must be resolved through indirect discussions or direct discussions, by the way. And if they are resolved, we can do another May 17 or a proper peace agreement. And until then, the relation with Israel are governed by a treaty that exists, which is the Armistice Treaty of 49.
Thanks, Albert. Michael?
What worries me, Ronnie, is if UNIFIL is gone, what worries me is that the Israelis will expand their zone of control in South Lebanon. And therefore, your questions, will the army be in a position to take control, is an open question. I'm very worried about this. And I think that the Israelis have been pushing for UNIFIL's elimination for a long time with this in mind. In other words, they feel that if there's no international pressure in the south, it will give them the latitude to do what they want there. And I think very much, I never put it beyond Israel to think in expansionary terms, first of all. With regard to a peace agreement, look, like Albert, I mean, we do have today something governing southern Lebanon. It's the Armistice Agreement, which needs, of course, to be updated in terms of, the types of forces that can be along the border. But, will Lebanon go ahead with a peace agreement before other Arab states? I still think we're caught in this very old logic. Lebanon will never be the first country to sign a peace, or the second. It'll be the last. Well, I think there is a lot of worry in Lebanon that this would in a way be a step too far in terms of social cohesion to go into a peace agreement. And we saw this with the 1983 May 17th agreement. I remember this very vividly. I think there was too much expectation at the time that this so-called withdrawal agreement could pass as a withdrawal agreement. It was clearly a peace agreement, and it didn't work. And I'm still very skeptical that, I know Netanyahu spoke about this yesterday, but the Israelis always push you to the limit and they say, we're coming to a peace agreement. I think Lebanese society would have a lot of problem digesting that, especially if major Arab states such as the Gulf states have not yet signed an agreement. So there is a fallback position, as Albert was saying. There is the Armistice Agreement. And we should try to renegotiate that. But again, without an international presence, it's going to be very difficult. And I'm very skeptical. We're not going to be able to replace UNIFIL with something else. The Israelis got what they wanted. They want a vacuum in the south, and the Americans will support them.
Since we've run out of time, I want to thank both Michael Young and Albert Kostanian for this timely, difficult discussion. And of course, Kulluna Irada for inviting me to moderate. I appreciate everyone's time. This is being recorded. It'll be released on Kulluna Irada's YouTube channel if anyone wants to watch it later or share. So on that note, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Albert, Diana, Shinan. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.